This episode of the EPS podcast contains strong language. Listener discretion is advised. The EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source, can be found on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/EPS podcast, and on the web, epspodcast.club. The first few months of 2001 is an interesting era in history. Having surpassed Y2K, society was no longer seeking inspiration from the promises of the future, but instead seemed to be turning its collective attention on the past. This was reflected in pop culture. The History Channel was growing in popularity. Top movies of the day were callbacks to mid-20th century stories like How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Mission Impossible. Best-selling books were American history titles. Ancestry.com was helping a growing number of people trace their individual past. And in music, this trend showed itself in the way of blending genres: ska, big band, swing, hip-hop, heavy metal, punk, jazz, folk music, all being paired up with each other to create new sounds. When trying to think of the perfect turn of the 21st century pop culture artifact recently, the Boston group Dropkick Murphys and their 2001 album Sing Loud, Sing Proud sprang to mind. Coincidentally, the next day after having this thought, the group's lead singer, Barr, made an Instagram post about the record, referring to it as the album that changed everything for the band. I contacted Al to see if he'd be willing to talk about this for the podcast, and he obliged. We talked a few times and went through all of the questions one would need to analyze a primary source, and the following is the result. I hope you enjoy it and also come to the same conclusion that I did, that Sing Loud, Sing Proud is a perfect document of the early 21st century.
What you need to know is Sing Loud, Sing Proud was supposed to be called Sing Along with the Dropkick Murphys, and we were going to have it loaded with guests. We were going to have Tom Waits, Joe Strummer, Steve Earle, Elvis Costello. We were just going to have everybody that we fucking met or that we loved on that record, and no one was available. Everybody was on tour, or they just said no, or they'd so the joke was, we went from like, Sing Along with the Dropkick Murphys and the idea of like a party and we're all out there having a great time with all these people, to 3 or 4 guys sitting around the table with the little, the little things you blow into. They go, with the party hats on, and just kind of, looking, freaking, cast out. We threw a party and nobody came kind of vibe.
Yeah. That's too funny.
We threw a party for ourselves and nobody came. It was, we really were trying to go for that record, and it just didn't happen. And then, Rick, our original guitar player, we had gotten James in the meantime as a second guitar player, and then Rick ended up quitting, sort of in the beginning of the recording of that. And it actually, if you're a super fan and you want to hear something kind of rock and roll, so Rick didn't play on all this. We hadn't done all the songs yet, so we kept basic tracks, but the Torch, which Rick wrote that song, he breaks the string during the recording of
really?
that, and we never changed that, so you can still hear the string break.
Oh, really?
You really peel your ears.
That's great.
Because it's a very stripped back song, obviously. And it was we just kept Rick's guitar on there. Turn back
on the clock, you're a bitter old man who's done nothing but work your hands to the bone.
So one of the questions I have about when you guys are touring so much and at the same time writing albums, when does the songwriting happen when you're on the road as often as you are? Like, does it happen while you're on the road, or?
I remember that was one of the questions. I don't like to pre-read questions, but that was one of the ones I actually skimmed. And I can tell you this: that there is no such thing as a. I mean, people use. There are definitely techniques that people use, and people are successful with certain techniques. I have never been successful with any patented technique to writing. I can tell you where I was with any song, that any of the 40, 50 songs that I've written or co-written with Dropkick Murphys, I can tell you where I was and what was going on, and I can tell you that none of them were at a desk with a pencil and a pad of paper under the guise of, I'm now going to write a record. It just doesn't happen that way, man. I mean, that's, it's just, I'm sure there are people who do that. That ain't me. I mean, inspiration finds you at the damnedest times, and the thing is, and I've learned this the hard way, is if you don't nail that melody that you're hearing in your head, or those lyrics that are, married, intertwined, coming out of your mouth, that you feel like you heard on the radio, but you've never heard on the radio, like, or you've never heard in this song or whatever, but you feel like it should be a song. If you don't write that, you don't capture that moment, either record it or write it down somewhere, it's gone. And then it's gone forever.
Yeah.
It's gone. And I've done that. I used to wake up at like 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and I'd have a song, but it would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind it would be good. I don't know if it was actually good or not, but I liked it, let's just say, and I wanted, and then I would fall back asleep, and then I would wake up when I would wake up, and I'd be like, shit, gone. So yeah, you have to. So yeah, no, there's no. I mean, yeah, no, we do as a band. We as a band, I think. I mean, I know that we'll get together. Like, we've done the last 4 records now with Ted Hutt as a producer, and he'll fly out to Boston for 10 days or something, and 15 days, whatever, and we'll do like a writing workshop. But even that, you go into that with stuff like, for me personally, and I know for all the other guys, we're writing all the time,
mm-hmm.
or we're not writing all the time. You know what I mean? When I say that, I mean, like, I write to write. Like, I will write, and it'll be the biggest pile of shit, but it keeps you in the practice of writing down your ideas and trying to formulate it into something. You know what I mean? And even when you have something that's good, it's hard to do, because for me, my conundrum personally, always been, I'll come up with great choruses, I'll come up with great verses, but it can never be the same. It can never be both. So one or the other. So, which is, Kenny and I have written a lot of songs together. Like, I mean, for example, Meanest of Times, I don't know how familiar you are with our discography, but the record Meanest of Times has a track on it called God Willing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but Kenny wrote the chorus before the verses, and then I wrote the verses as it was like a call response, what I mean? And as soon as I heard him sing the chorus, the verses were right there, and I went and wrote them. I mean, I literally wrote the first verse in 3 minutes.
Oh wow!
And it was all about my life. And then he said, "Can you write the second verse to be inclusive of things that I've gone through?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I knew, because the opening of the verse for God Willing is, Ricky and Gar, they took it too far, they didn't make it. Now, Ricky was the rhythm guitarist for the Bruisers, who ate a brick of heroin and died. Gar was my high school buddy who in ninth grade, and our fathers miles an hour on the highway. Fell off, obviously, and died. And anyways, and then, and then Christy, and Stace, they made no mistake. They didn't make it. Christy was Kurt Gove, the guitar player from the Five Walls of Power, a band that I was in high school. He later went on to do a band called the Radix. They were out of New York City, and he was also in the U.S. Bombs and in the LES Stitches. And in any event, his sister Chrissy was followed home by two men, and they raped her, and then they killed her with a rock.
Oh my God!
And then Stacy was a friend from high school with the punk scene, and she got cancer and like 3 times through her life, and the third time it killed her. And then the second verse, and I'm going through this with you just because it's like this is and it literally all just came out of me because those were all two of those tragedies that I just come off of those recently enough in the last 10 years, and I've been looking for a way to unload them in the way of a song for a long time, so it was like perfect.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have come if Kenny hadn't had the, God willing, because that inspired my response. And sometimes it's been just the opposite, where I will come up with a chorus and he'll write a verse, or it's nice to have a partner in crime or 2 or 3. And Kenny and I generally write all the lyrics for the band, and then the band will do the music. That's not to say that we don't come up with melodies as well. But the second verse is interesting, because I just wanted to go back to that. The second verse is, Chicky and Fly. Chicken Man was a friend of Kenny's, and Fly was a friend of Kenny. There's just, again, 2 people that died tragically. It just kind of mirrored the first verse, but it pertained to, Kenny, and people that, Kenny's lost in his life. In any event, but yeah, so the writing process is very, like the 2 songs, so Sing Loud, Sing Proud so that was the record that changed everything for the band, but my contributions on that record were The Gauntlet and Forever, which in my opinion are arguably the 2 most popular songs on the record.
I was just going to say that, actually.
If you look through the fans, Forever has been used for funerals and weddings, and I think it was definitely the band's first ballad. It ushered in a time when we finally saw the fairer sex showing up at our shows, and which was cool, because before it was all dudes, but there were just few and far between women at any Dropkick Murphy shows in the early days, and then we wrote Forever, and all of a sudden we had Girls Coming, The Gauntlet. That was another one where it was just like, I was inspired to write, those lyrics, and it all just kind of came out of me in one shot. But in terms of Sing Loud, Sing Proud, so the band was a 4-piece. It was Rick Barton, Matt Kelly, Ken Casey, and then yours truly.
Yeah.
And then when I joined the band, the mindset was this: we're a 4-piece band. We literally had a cassette that we would approach the house sound guy with before we played and say, "Can you play this like Napoleon Dynamite style?" You know what I mean? Like this before we go on. And it was the bagpipes to Scotland the Brave.
Mm-hmm.
And then the band would come out and play along with the bagpipe track that was being played through the house PA.
Yeah.
So that was how we did it, unless we were in Boston and Joe Delaney, who plays on Do or Die, would come out. But Joe was a pipe fitter, had a family, and was sending money back to Ireland. He wasn't fucking going to go on tour with these fucking guys.
Yeah.
We weren't making, we were just kind of, squeaking by, and we were doing it because I had, as I said before, met these guys who were all hard, dedicated, and willing to throw caution to the wind and fucking go for it. And by the way, when I joined the band, it was the first band I joined that had an actual manager. But a lot of funny stuff, man, back then, you know what I mean? Like, it was a different world. But so with this 4-piece band, and we've been touring like crazy.
So on that record, one of the things that, I mean, there's, when you look at all the track listings, you know, now I have it up, when it comes to covering songs, and there's several cover songs on it in their own way, between, you know, the opening song, you know, for Boston, the fight song, and then the Irish folk songs, and Which Side Are You On is also, you know, an update. What makes you guys decide which song, you know, how to choose a cover song? Like, is there somebody that brings it forward, like, I like Rocky Road to Dublin, I think we should do that, or...
Oh, you mean in terms of the trad song, the traditional song?
Yeah.
You know, that's like, you know, I mean, again, you know, I joined a moving ship in the sense that, you know, I mean, so I had to learn how to sing ahead of the beat. I was, you know, I mean, the punk rock that the Bruisers did was very blues influenced, so that's always singing in the pocket, you know.
Yeah.
Irish music is ahead of the beat, so I had to learn kind of how to sing that way, and it's not, you know, it didn't come second nature to me. It was hard. It was hard for me to learn to do it and then to make it authentic, to kind of own it.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me a little bit. So there was a lot of, quote unquote, for lack of a better way, like American Irish. We were a punk band, American, but, you know, drawing upon those Irish roots. So when we would do a trad song, you know, it would usually be Matt and Penny who would, you know, they would look at 2 or 3 songs that they really liked, because both of those guys really like Irish, you know, like those old Irish songs and stuff. I mean, I got to plead ignorant, you know what I mean? To me, it all sounded like somebody trying to play Benny Hill music. So, I was, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't, that's not where I didn't come from that world, you know, although American folk was something that I was very familiar with, because my father was a teacher, and, you know, there were always teachers playing music in our house when I was a kid. So I did hear a lot of, ended up, you know, it's like, but I'm the Scottish crowd in the band, so I wasn't familiar, and, you know, in the Irish music, you know.
It's and another song that is on there that stands out is Caps and Bottles. You know, that was a single earlier in the band's career. Is there a reason why that one was re-recorded? I know that they had re-recorded on Do or Die. I forget one of the last songs on Do or Die was a update, and then on Gangs All Here, that didn't they record one of their earlier you guys re-recorded an earlier single on that one. Why was Caps and Bottles? Do you remember why they wanted you to sing that one?
You know, I mean, I think we just, you know, we were doing that song a lot when I first joined the band, and I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, Kenny and Matt wanted, and Rick wanted to get to capture that song, because, I mean, the thing with Do or Die was, it was hard for those guys then to listen to Do or Die. It was their first record, but then, you know, Mike had left, and it was kind of it just left a bad taste in everybody's mouth at the time, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
You know, not me, because I have nothing to do with it, but so those guys, I think it was hard for them to listen to those songs with Mike's voice. So,
yeah,
you know, there was always a joke of, maybe should we record the whole album with my voice or whatever, which I don't think, you know, that record is perfect for the way it is, and you can't change that, and that's it with it, and that's, without me, and that's fine. That's, you know, my ego can take that.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I always loved Caps and Bottles, and I like kind of my approach to it was really, I mean, I'm not singing it too often, but I always kind of picture that kind of, almost, you know, that you know, was doo-wop, but, you know, like that kind of era, the early 60s.
Yeah.
That, you know, still had that, you know, 50s swagger in the sense of the hair and the, you know, and the more reliant on the vocals versus the music, you know.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a great song, and I think I messaged you earlier that I've been re-listening to this album a lot the last couple of days, and that one, I mean, I like the original, but I think the update is great. I mean, it just really it's like perfect. I like that version better. I think is the Sing Loud, Sing Proud one.
Thank you.
And a lot of the songs on there, I guess I forgot just how much, because I was looking forward to this album a lot when it was coming out, and because I loved the first two so much, and like I remember like searching up and down my family tree looking to see if I had any Irish in me, so I could be like, yeah, Dropkick Murphys, it's Irish like me, and I really don't. I think I have like a great grandmother somewhere that was from Ireland or something like that. But I remember going to see you guys in Rochester, New York, and Lars Fredriksson and the Bastards were opening, and my family heritage is Danish, like Lars, and I remember going up to him because he was at his own merch table during the show, and I went over and I was like, hey, something about being Danish. And I remember him lifting up his sleeve to show me a tattoo he has of the Danish flag. And I was like, yeah. And, he gave like a handshake and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I guess I'm going to go back to being Danish again. I'm not, trying to be Irish anymore, because of that. He produced the first two Dropkick Murphys records.
He did.
Is there a reason why Ken Casey did the Sing Loud, Sing Proud, or did Lars? Was he interested?
Man, we said, "Fuck you, man, you're fired." No, this is the thing. Like again, when I say I joined a moving ship, I mean literally. Like I joined on May 7th, May 14th. I was in the studio recording "Crystal Fall and Soul," the single.
Oh wow!
7 days later. Like, there was literally, I was on tour with the Pie Tasters. Like, we started recording Gangs All Here. Like, I kept hearing about Lars was coming, Lars was coming, Lars was coming. Now, I had met Lars, let me go back. I got it. So, yeah, okay. So, this is what's weird. So, I recorded, so I recorded Crystal Fallen Soul 7 days after I joined the band, May 14th, 1998. But the Bruisers still had shows to do. Like we had some commitments we still had to honor, and one of those actually came up after I was already kind of accepted the job singing for the Dropkicks. The phone rings, and it's Stormy Shepherd, and she is wondering if we would be willing to open for do a surprise Rancid show. They're going to do, and we wanted to do our own Boston show. The Bruisers wanted to do our own Boston show, but because we're a farewell show kind of thing. But all of a sudden Rancid's in town. Their Life Won't Wait, and that's the record that I was introduced to Rancid. I was aware that there was Rancid, but I'd heard them, from the songs I'd heard on the radio and stuff.
Yeah,
I thought they were great, but I never went and bought their records or anything because, in my mind, I was like, I already kind of listened to music. It's derivative of this. It wasn't until I started working with the Dropkicks that it was inevitable because of the Rancid connection, and then Life Won't Wait blew me away. I was just like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's kind of their Sandinista after London Calling,
right?
Out Come the Wolves being London Calling, if you will, in terms of success, and just to some people palpability. But I thought Life Won't Wait was an incredible record.
Yeah, that Blood Clot, that first single off there,
2.5 hours.
Yeah,
when we opened for them at the Middle East.
Oh man,
there was sweat coming off the ceiling. It was amazing. But anyways, Rancid was like the group, right? It was like, right. I remember discovering the Ramones, and then like a week later, Rancid. And it seemed like in the mid 90s, it was the West Coast punk scene was really the dominant one. That was really on the radio. That was on MTV. And
but in the meantime, it seemed like the East Coast scene was kind of building up a bit, and so with Lars,
the East Coast scene. I mean, in fairness, the East Coast scene was always there. It was just a lot less media celebrated. So
the
really
commercial side of
because obviously you're going to have like that whole crossing of like the skate surf culture punk, and then that's going to get shown on just pop culture shows, and then that's going to go from there. So you're obviously it would seem that way, and all the Max and Rock and Roll and all those other fanzines like Flipside and stuff. It all came from California too. California's a massive state anyway, so that. I mean, I had like back in the '80s, I had my record collection set up so it was like SoCal, NoCal.
Yeah,
and, you know what I mean? Like, the bands from Oxnard and then the bands from LA.
I mean, you can hear the difference too. I mean, there is a distinct geographical. At least for a while. I mean, it really you could hear it in the music.
Very true. Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. But anyways, I kind of digress. But so in terms of why did Lars not do Sing Loud, Sing Proud? It really we didn't stop moving. Like Kenny produced Curse of Fallen Soul. When Lars heard that, he was so freaking pissed at Kenny for putting that out, because he was like, Sid McCool's is the best fucking song he heard in a long time, and he's like, that would have been the way I would have started Gangs All Here, and now you can't do it. And Ken's like, why not? He's like, because you've already put it out there. You put it out there. I mean, granted, we put Curse on Gangs, but I always liked the version that we did on the original single better myself. I just thought it was more, it just, to me, was, it was, it captured it more, I thought. But yeah, so there was that. But I mean, but Kenny was producing, and he was just like, and he was in there with Lars anyways. When Lars was getting the credit, but Ken was just Ken would be learning at the same time. But Ken's got a really good studio ear, you know what I mean? And he, even after he started producing full time for us, I mean, he started doing other bands too, I mean, he's produced, there's an Unseen record he produced, also this band Brain Failure from China.
Years ago, I remember Brain Failure and The Business in Albany, New York was a show that I saw, and they were great. I thought they were fantastic. So he produced for them too?
Yeah, he did one of their records.
So, I mean, that seems to be like the...
Well, I mean, just to finish my thought, so basically, we didn't stop moving. So it was like, we were ready to do Sing Loud, Sing Proud. We already started doing demos for it and stuff. And in the meantime, we'd met kids across the country that played Celtic instruments. Kenny's mentality when I joined the band was we don't play these instruments live, so it's disingenuous to lay the record. That's what Gangs All Here didn't have even as much focus as Do or Die had, and maybe it should have had more. But in any event, so it was like we just didn't stop. So we had met people on tour. We'd already kind of secured that they were going to come to Boston, and we were going to. They were going to join the band, and we were going to have a mandolin player who also played tin whistle and accordion, and we were going to have an actual touring bagpiper. We were going to have, we were going to have all these things. So all of a sudden, we went from a 4-piece to a 7-piece, and we had 2 guitar players, and it was so, it was crazy. And we were on a bus, and it was, it was just like, so yeah, everything was changing back to, that too. I mean, everything was changing. It was like, holy shit, we're changing. This is, that Sing Loud, Sing Proud did 10,000 the first week out of the box. So, we did, I think Do or Die did, I think it was like 1,700 the first week. And again, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually was when you think of a band that had no name recognition at all. I mean, Epitaph, Hellcat, we're very excited about those numbers. I want to say Gangs All Here did like 3,400. So, and that's then they would say you're going to double, if you double what you did on the last record, your career's, you're doing well, and you want that slow climb and not that quick burn. And then, but this was what was crazy. We went from that to then Do or Die came. I mean, then Gangs All Here came out, and it did 10,000. Mm-hmm. And that was huge, because it was like, we were on commercial radio. We weren't on even college radio. We had just toured the fuck out of the country and Germany and France and all of Europe and England and mostly America, and all of a sudden we released this record and it does 10,000 out of the box, and we're, so it that was, again, everything is, it just completely, it just was changing. We were seeing, we started doing headlining tours. We also changed our intro for the first time. The band always did the Scotland the Brave into Do or Die, and they did that from their, from when they wrote that, or when they incorporated it into Do or Die, to, then when we released, so all through Gangs All Here, we would use it as well. When we were touring on that record, because Mike left in February, or maybe he left it in March or early March or something. Whenever he left, the record Do or Die hadn't been out very long. So when I joined the band, I was touring already to support Do or Die, Gangs All Here. Again, going back to why did Lars not produce Sing Loud, Sing Proud? It was literally, Lars is on tour with Rancid right now. We want to start recording demos, so we're just going to do it. And, and I remember we were on tour, on that tour, the Bastards tour, and Lars is like, when are we going to start, when are you going to start sending me demos? And we'd already recorded Sing Loud. and I looked at Kenny, and I went, mouth, you haven't told him? And Kenny just looked at me like, it's like this awkward moment.
Sorry.
And I think initially, of course, Lars is a little pissed off at us, and of course, but then he understood, it had nothing to do with, he's a great producer and amazing, and if it wasn't for the help of the Rancid and the Boston's and all the people that helped the band in the early days, then we wouldn't have had wouldn't have been where we wouldn't have gotten to where we are.
I remember being there pretty much through all of that, because like I said, I saw the Dropkick Murphys with Mike in their first tour. I think they Escape from Boston 1, and then it seemed like at least twice a year the group was coming back and forth, and I was always within proximity of being able to go see a show, whether it be in Rochester, Buffalo, Burlington, Vermont. I remember seeing a Dropkick Murphys show there, which you guys did have a live bagpiper for that. And then I remember seeing you on 2 different Warped tours in Montreal, and it was after Sing Loud, Sing Proud that I remember seeing the distinct difference of, now there's like 7 guys on stage instead of 4. And it was like, pretty, it was a big change. And I think for a lot of the fans, including me, I was like, yeah, okay. Because the record had that music, it only made sense that the live show would also have it. It would be weird, like you said before, if you had all these additional instruments on the album, but then the live show was just, again, 4 guys. It would seem disingenuous.
Exactly.
Did you notice? I mean, because I noticed being in the audience, the crowd started to change, and the audience started to change after Sing Loud, Sing Proud was released. And I think by the time that I moved back to New England, I remember like hearing people like looking forward to the St. Patrick's Day show in Boston, and it was not traditional punk rocker fans at all. Like they were just like ordinary like teachers and librarians, and people like, oh, I'm going to go see the Dropkick Murphys. And from the stage, did you start to notice a difference in the audience?
Well, that was the interesting thing, and and this is, Kenny used to say this all the time, is we became this bridge band in the sense that, maybe those people that got into Rancid and then got into the Clash, where I People love to compare them. But then we became this bridge between the Pogues and the Ramones and modern day, what became modern day. They now is a genre, Irish punk. When I joined the Dropkick Murphys, I can say this because I joined the Dropkick Murphys when they had already been a band for a while. There was no genre called Irish punk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, and the Dropkick Murphys have always tipped their hats to the trad bands from Ireland and to the Pogues, but for the influences. But in 1996, when they started, there weren't all these bands. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The Dropkicks are, one of the bands in the forefront. You know, I mean, there's a couple of bands that come from Canada that were around before the Dropkicks, but that's besides those bands that no one really got to see. Aside from those bands, it was just the Pogues,
Mm-hmm.
So we became one of those bridge bands. So in terms to answer your question, we started to see kids that were coming. All of a sudden, their parents, their uncles were coming because it's like the Wild Rover, and the Rocky Road to Dublin, and so there's all these songs that these people would hear in an Irish fest or St. Paddy's Day or whatever, and so they were coming. So yeah, more main. I hesitate to use the term mainstream, but we started to see people that were definitely outside of the punk rock scene coming.
Mm-hmm. A lot of my introduction to Irish folk music was through Dropkick Murphys, like the songs that I would learn to play, and like when I'd go to St. Patrick's Day events or see an Irish folk band playing or something like that, I would request things like Finnegan's Wake or Rocky Road to Dublin or something because of Dropkick Murphys. So it was like a similar way that you were saying about how Rancid was an introduction to the Clash, which is exactly accurate for me. I didn't know anything about the Clash until I saw that comparison with Rancid. I think I started buying Clancy Brothers records, after I heard the Dropkick Murphys, because I'm like,
that's what I mean, so that's the thing, is like we heard that from people in both directions. You had people that were from the Clancy Brothers era who were coming to see us because their grandson had turned them on to us, and then in reverse, you have people like your age at the time that were listening to us and then going and buying the Clancy Brothers.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing for the time period. I mean, for 2000, for a good part of the 20th century, people were looking forward to 2000. Everything, the word 2000 meant futuristic, and yet you get to 2000 and there seems to be a lot more people interested in history and historic sounds and old sounds, and that's why this album really kind of strikes it perfectly. It's almost like a review of sorts of like the entire 20th century of music, because like Ramble and Roll has like that 50s sound to it. The Gauntlet really sounds to me like a Clash song. It has like I forget exactly which Clash song I was listening to the other day. I'm like, it really there's one.
It's inspired from that era of punk. I mean, I dare say, because before I had the first Clash album, I had Inflammable Material by Simple Fingers,
Mm-hmm.
So that was like my introduction to, like punk, Simple Fingers, Ramones, Sex Pistols, Clash, pretty much that order, and then I started hearing, like the American hardcore stuff. I think the first stuff I ever heard was like Betacon by Bad Brains, and then like DOA and Agent Orange, and a lot of the DC, California, New York,
right,
all that stuff. A lot of the compilations is why you get that kind of peppering of bands from all over the country, and some from Canada, obviously as well.
And that it was a compilation like that, and that's where I first heard the Murphys. And it was funny because just a couple months ago, I was talking to my parents, and they watched the Fenway Park show that you guys did in 2020, and they were like, "Oh, that was so great! Like, that's one of the bands that you like, right? Like when Dropkick Murphys. I remember you listening to them. Like, yeah, finally you're coming around to." Enjoying the music that I did. I mean, they were always like behind by a little bit. Like, I remember I got into the Ramones like right in like 1996, like their last year, and they were doing Lollapalooza, and I wanted to go see Lollapalooza for the Ramones, and Rancid was on that tour too. And my parents were like, I don't know, it's kind of, you know, far away, and you're kind of young and stuff. So they didn't let me go. About a year later, I'm listening to Ramones, and they listened to it with me, and they're like, oh, this is pretty good. This reminds me of like the stuff we used to listen to in the 60s. I'm like, I know. And you didn't let me go, and I didn't get to see, you know, the band. So they, you know, same thing with the Dropkick Murphys. They're like, you know, behind by, you know, so many years, but they finally get around. You mentioned before about the song Forever as being one of the songs that you wrote, and you know, personally that song, it meant a lot to me then, and it still means a lot to me now. I listen to it all the time. You know, I listen to it a lot, and what was the inspiration for Forever? Because I think on surface, a lot of people think it's like a love song, but it's not.
No,
not at all.
They're not wrong. The inspiration for Forever was boy. My wife and I have been married for going on 29 years. But we've been together for 30, going on 33 years.
Oh wow.
Anyways, and we got 3 children. Blah 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 blah. And we're still, you know, she still, you know, acts like she likes me, so that's kind of cool. But you know, back then, in 2000, and well, actually, I think it was probably, you know, late 99 or 2000 when I wrote it. And basically, the band Rick came up with this song. It was, you know, it was the music, and it sounded like 2 different songs. It slowed down and sped up, and it didn't seem very remarkable at the time. And Rick was just like, I think it's good. And but I immediately thought maybe, you know, so I said, let me take it home and do something with it. So we used to record everything. So I recorded it, you know, on a cassette, and I took it home, and then I came up with a melody that the lyrics are so much good, which go kind of different than the music. I mean, obviously there's the melody that's driving through it, which is the melody I was singing to, but then there's the bass, you know, just the basic, you know, foundation of the music. That's just not the melody, but the melody that you hear, Ken and I singing is the one that I came up with when I came up with the lyrics. Anyways, I remember just thinking, you know, some of the, you know, like, you know, there's this song that Social Distortion have, Another State of Mind, which was one of my favorites when I was a teenager. I always loved that, you know, just that he was calling his girlfriend from tour kind of thing. I can remember being 16, 17, hearing that song and, you know, fantasizing about someday, you know, and never realizing that, that actually was going to be me. I just wasn't going to be a teenager.
Yeah.
In my 30s, but, you know.
That's a...
Anyways, my wife and I have been through a whole lot of stuff, and anyways, I just, you know, wrote that. I wrote that kind of as like a love song to her, and when I sung it, I was singing it, you know, I you know, there was a lot of code, you know, there was a lot of fleshing out still that had to happen, but I can remember, you know, singing it to my wife, and you know, in any event, we when we featured it, though, we didn't want to, like, I didn't really talk about it being about my wife at the time, because we didn't want it to be the main focus of the song. We wanted it to be just the universality of the fact that, you know, anybody could relate to the idea of forever loving somebody, you know, because the love of a mother or father or a sister or a brother or, you know, a family member or a friend, you know, a dear friend, you know, that kind of thing. So we just wanted people to think outside of the romantic love, not be so, you know, predictable. Right.
I remember Ken introducing it that way at one of the shows when you guys played it. It wasn't like, you know, he's like, this is a love song, but it's not the kind that you're thinking, kind of thing. So that that. I wanted to ask about the album cover for Sing Loud, Sing Proud, about the mural. What's the story behind that?
There was it was a father and daughter who did it originally, and they painted it in. It's on the outside of this liquor store in Southie, and it's funny, we've had there's been all kinds of graffiti on there, but no one's ever fucked with it. Everybody's always been very respectful of it. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks huge. It's not as big as you think it is, but it's, and it looks like it's really up high. You can stand right next to it and get a picture.
So is it, was that mural done for the album cover, or they just did it?
Yeah. We wanted to have exactly.
Okay. So, because I mean, in that time period.
Remember, that was fucking 2000.
Yeah. Well, because in that era, everything was all futuristic. Like people were designing.
2000 was when we recorded that. Was that again?
Yeah, I mean everything in the year 2000, like in music and album covers and stuff, is all sleek and modern looking in 2000, and that's why it really stands out as being a family crest. It's like it looks like from medieval period, and I really think that's what.
That's kind of what we were going for.
Exactly, and it encapsulates the album perfectly, and really the whole, it represents the band, spot on as far as
right.
Because I was thinking about this just today, because I'm a teacher, so I think in terms of essays and stuff like that, and proving an argument basically. I was thinking of how last time we were talking about the song "Going Strong" off of The Gang's All Here. And I'm like, that song is almost like the introductory paragraph and then Sing Loud, Sing Proud is almost like the evidence. It's like the rest of the essay, because it really seems to prove that whole idea of because by the end of the 90s, we're on to at least second generation punk rock. The new generation of kids. That's why I really think that song "Going Strong" spoke to my era.
Well,
because
and I wanted to get back to that as well, because when you say that, you're so right about that. So the resurgence of punk came, we were just paying agnostic front, one voice record. There's 180 kids, 120 kids. You got Biohazard, coming through, the Rat, nobody's coming. What's going on here? And then 1996 comes along, and our phone stops ringing, Bruisers. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And Mark Ducky from the Ducky Boys calls me up, and he's like, Al, have you heard of this band, the Dropkick Murphys? And I'm like, yeah, I heard of them. They're going nowhere fast. And I was very resentful, because they were getting all of a sudden they were getting all the national act shows, and taking all of a sudden our phone stopped ringing. And I'm like, what the fuck is this all about? And then they got signed to Hellcat, and all this stuff's going on for them. And our bass player Johnny, who was like my right hand man, is always trying to put their record on, and I'm like, Johnny, I'm gonna fucking punch the shit out of you. I was just jealous, what I mean? I was like, these guys are nowhere, blah, 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 I don't like them, blah, 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 but they were, secretly I was like, these guys are great.
Yeah.
But, it's fucking, wanted what they had. So, egg on my face, but I've told this story many times in interviews. I can remember telling Mark Ducky, these guys are going nowhere fast. And then, next thing you know, there's a split out there with Dropkicks on one side and Bruises on the other side. And then it's like, Al ends up singing for Dropkick Murphys. It's just funny, but
yeah.
New England ain't that big.
No, it's definitely not. And it's, I guess I'll end by saying this, as that era, and I think that you said it perfectly with that album really changing everything for the group, because I think that that's the album that kind of made
Dropkick Murphys as like the sound of New England, the sound of Boston, like what people thought of.
So Lars said something, because we took the Bastards on tour, right as we'd already kind of finished recording the record, and Lars was asking for demos, and because we hadn't said Kenny's doing this one, and it was all good, Lars, schedules and things are fine, and he was like, fucking this is an incredible record, and he was like, you're not a punk band anymore, you're Americana. And I was like, wow, but you have to realize too that like that was our first foray into the 7-piece, banjos, tin whistles, accordions, bouzouki, mandolins. We had no fucking and live bagpipes. We had no fucking idea what we were doing, and we didn't know how to mic any of that shit. We could. I think I said that already in the last time we spoke. We would come back from a tour, and we'd have another broken accordion. We had like a pile of 15 broken accordions in our practice space. Accordions aren't cheap.
No.
And we'd have to buy another accordion. We didn't know. We didn't have a fucking clue, but then somebody told us what we had to do in order to travel with accordion, to fly with them, and there's something we had to do. There was all kinds of things. We had no fucking clue. Like, this is the thing. We've got this guy, Pete Robertson, doing the front of the house for us now, and John Mark Antonio doing monitors. Those guys are the best in the business. I don't care what you fucking tell me. Those guys are the best for Dropkick Murphys because they make us sound great. Now, you have to remember, we got these guys like, they've been with us for, let's just say, last 9 years or whatever. They've been with us. And so we've got people, and we've been a band for 26 years, so we've got people who's been fucking coming to see us for free, because they're on a guest list forever. Mm-hmm. We get Pete and John, and we got people who've been seeing us forever. All of a sudden they're going like this, man, you guys sounded so fucking good tonight. What's going on? And we'd be like, okay, what are you saying? Like, then I like literally, like I heard somebody posted, basically it was like this epiphany that all these people have been coming to see us for. It's like all of a sudden we sound great, all of a sudden things are awesome, and we were like going, oh, that's awesome, and wait a minute, what's the other side of that? You know what I mean? Like, what's been going on? But yeah, so I saw a live IG post of us, in some huge place, and we sounded amazing. I'm like, oh my God, these guys, these guys are really, just freaking, they're incredible. I mean, put it this way, last time we played Brixton Academy, the sound man for the Rolling Stones was there, and the only reason why we know that is he runs Radio City Music Hall. Pete Robertson, when he's on a tour with us, that's one of his gigs. He was there, and he finally meets the guy who runs the place, and the guy's like, oh, what band is it you work for again? And Pete goes, Dropkick Murphys. Goes, I saw you at Brixton Academy a month ago. It was incredible. So Pete's like totally nerding out in the fact that the freaking sound guy for the Rolling Stones is telling him how great it sounds.
That's great. This is really incredible. I mean, because like you said, I mean, I can only, up until this point, I could only be the listener of the album. I can't possibly know all these backstories. And, so far, all the episodes of my podcast that I've been doing has all been just like me and somebody else that has nothing to do with actually creating the thing that we're talking about. Just kind of theorizing about stuff and using it as like, okay, what does this tell us about the time period? So all of these, I mean, it's just been incredible talking to you about this because like every single second, like I've been listening to the album a lot lately, because of what we're doing here. And now that I know, I'm like, man, so much work and so much stuff behind every single part of that album.
I know. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we were, because you have to understand too, is what was happening. We went from a 4-piece to losing the original guitar player who wrote, the music of Do or Die and Gang Saw Here. We went from that to, to James. James is like, I know a guy, and it's really, I don't know. Who is he, James? He said, well, is he a good guitar player? Yeah, he's great. I just think I don't know. He's just not my kind of, James is the way James is. And so James brings this guy, Mark Orrell, who we ended up calling the Kid, who's a freaking, at the time he was 17-year-old working at Blockbuster. He had quit school. He came in, he blew us away. I mean, he literally he played, and then he just started singing, and he knew all the words. And we were like, holy fuck, this kid's amazing. And his first tour was Japan.
Whoa.
And that was 2000. So Mark the Kid's first tour, he was 17. We made him when we went on Warped Tour 2003, we made him get his GED that summer.
Jeez. This album in particular, but ever since then, one thing that even just the ordinary, kind of casual fan, just somebody that can tell that you're probably the most genuine band out there, most authentic, real group.
I think there's a lot of authentic, genuine bands out there, but I don't know that they are going to be so candid in interviews and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it's
Al Barr, thank you for everything.
always been.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast almost as much as I enjoyed making it. Please like, subscribe, and otherwise follow the show to hear future episodes. Back episodes can be found at epspodcast.club or wherever you get your podcasts. The EPS podcast can be found on social media, including Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to support the show, please visit patreon.com/EPSpodcast. Join me next time on the EPS podcast, where everything, including the Dropkick Murphys' 2001 album, Sing Loud, Sing Proud, is a primary source.